All right. Hello. Welcome to Reading the Revolution. We're so excited to kick off this brand new program, our take on the book club. And what's nice about this program is there's no pre-reading required. We're going to be talking about our favorite genres. We're talking about the things that we love about literature. And we're going to be talking about the ways that these themes apply to our real lives and this moment in history. So thank you for being here with us tonight. We do have closed captions on Facebook if you would like to see this with captions. So if you need captions, please join us there. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session. So please make sure that you are answering those questions or asking those questions in the chat. We will try to get to them at the end of the session. We may not stop the program to answer questions, but we'll try to get to them at the end. So make sure you submit your comments and your questions there. Now, right now, tell us where you're joining us from in the chat and tell us what you're reading. Tonight, we're talking about Smut, our favorite, Book Talk's favorite. We love romance. So that's what we'll be discussing in depth tonight, but we know that not everyone's a romance reader. I'll out myself and say that right now, I am currently reading, I'll pull it up. I'm reading Attack from Within. This is on disinformation. It's a hyperfixation of mine right now for probably obvious reasons. But I want to know what y'all are reading too. I am reading some romance in between as well. I got to read some Emily Rath this last week. So make sure you tell us what you're reading. Now I'm going to check out what y'all are reading too. Hi from we have a lot of Californians so far. Got some Missouri, some Pennsylvania. Hey, Philly. All right. I'm coming to y'all from California. My name is Risa. I am the digital organizer here with Women's March. So really excited to be your host tonight. So again, tell us what you're reading. We are so excited that all these readers are going to be talking with us tonight. And we have some great writers too. All right. We are reading Rebel Witch. That sounds fun. I love a spooky read. All right. Let's see. Psychotic Obsession by Lee Rivers. Very nice. All right. Hey, Louisiana. Thanks for joining us. Now, as we start to join the chat, I do want to let you know that we do have some community norms. Be kind in the chat. Don't take over the chat. Don't use the chat to be promotional and spammy because we are heavy-handed on the ban hammer and we will delete your comments and ban you from the chat. So be good to each other, be good to the chat. It is a community space. We also have some norms, so feel free to take a look at our working agreements to get to know them better. All right, so in the chat, we have some people who have just finished Ravensong. The History of Witchcraft, very cool. I saw Feminist Fight Club up higher in the chat. Excellent. The History of Queen Victoria's Daughter Louise, about a usual romance reader. Very cool. All right, Reading Girl on Girl by Sophie Gilbert. Very cool. Pen Pal by J.T. Geisinger. Excellent. We have so many readers here in the chat, and we're so excited that you've all decided to join us to talk romance and smut because we love smut. All right. So final reminder, be excellent in the chat. Keep telling us where you're coming from and what you are reading. Excellent, excellent. Alison Weir books on the wives of Henry VIII. Henry VIII is so fascinating, but he's not fascinating. It's his wives. His wives are the ones who are so fascinating. And love that for you. All right. The Aviator and the Showman. Interesting. All right. We have some sci-fi readers too. The Midnight Feast. Excellent. All right. Who is Government? We have some nonfiction readers too. Love it. All right. Well, thank you, all you readers, for joining us tonight. We are closing out summer with the Summer of Smut. We're talking spicy, and by spicy, I mean we're discussing the validity, feminism, and revolutionary nature of romance reading and readership in general. We have incredible guests joining us for this conversation, so I'm going to start by introducing our guest author, Dr. Emily Rath. Emily Rath was raised in Northern Kentucky, a lifelong lover of words. She's been writing for as long as she could hold a pencil. However, before pursuing writing, she pursued her first love, international politics, and earned a BA in political science and philosophy, 2 MAs in political science, and PhDs in peace studies and political science. While a university professor, she specialized in teaching modern African politics, international relations, developmental studies, and peace studies. She is now a full-time author and lives in the Pacific Northwest with her husband, kiddo, and 3 very needy and unruly cats. Very relatable. Now with 12 published books to her name, including the Second Son series, the Jacksonville Rays hockey series, Whiskey and Sin, and North is the Night, we are so thrilled to welcome the multi-hyphenate, Emily Rath. Hi, Emily.
Hello everyone. Thanks so
We
much
are
for having
also,
me.
thanks. We are also joined by Divinity Ray. As they describe themselves, she is literally just a girl, lover of books, writer of stories, and professional silly goose that is a little bit obsessed with romance and fantasy. They're a longtime bookish creator, a top 10 Substack creator for fiction, and now an aspiring author. Welcome, Divinity Ray.
Hello.
All right. Thank you both for being here. We're really excited to have you in this conversation with us. So, we want to start by addressing the elephant in the room. Readership and literacy on the whole have faced a steady decline over a number of years. Emily, you've been incredibly outspoken about the revolutionary nature of reading and literacy in general. So, to that end, and with apologies for the alliteration, what role do you think romance reading plays in rekindling readership? I genuinely tried to find another way to say that.
The role that romance reading plays in rekindling readership. I think it's hard to even calculate. It's hard to even calculate the impact that romance as a genre, and in particular, this very strange thing that happened that was the pandemic, right? Because that was what really created this explosion of new readership. Even people like me, I didn't have a Kindle before the pandemic, and then being trapped in my house and unable to go to a bookstore, I got my first Kindle and I got my first KU subscription. And then down the rabbit hole I went for how long were we trapped in our houses, right? I think it was a combination of those two things that really created this movement, right? Of all of these people rediscovering reading, and in particular, romance being that gateway into them rediscovering reading. I think it's hard to even measure in terms of what it has meant for people using romance as a gateway into, in many cases, a deeper look into, like what you had posted, nonfiction, right? Going deeper than romance into other genres. Some people have just continued to float in romance and they're happy there and they're reading 100 and 200 books a year, and that's great, right? But yeah, it's been wild. It's been wild to see what's happened.
I think for me too, how it's rekindled readership is like, I think a lot of people are returning to self and using love as a basis for community. And I think that that's wildly revolutionary. That something that has been, historically seen as just something only women do has become like this amazing, powerful movement of bringing people together on the basis of something that you don't really think would be a jumping point for radicalizing a lot of people, but it has been. It's like reading these romance books. And like Emily said, it was the pandemic that literally kind of like put us all in this rabbit hole of finding one book, one community, and it just spun out of control. I went from someone who had maybe about 2 or 3 books in my house, and now I have over 200 books in my personal library, and most of which I have finished and read. So 100% agree that romance has been a gateway drug, if you
Mhm.
will, getting people back reading and therefore thinking. And so, like, I think on that basis, romance can't be dismissed as something that has rekindled this like field of thought that was declining and dying at a rapid rate.
Now, in that same vein, because romance literature does have a reputation for being fluffy, easy reading, and some people question its place in literature. Meanwhile, Book Talk and Bookstagram are explosively popular. There are so many romance authors. It seems like a really robust and tight knit community, even just among the authors themselves. And these books are largely feminine. These communities are largely femme online communities, and they've grown up around romance literature. So, how do you explain the validity of the romance genre to people who are cynical about it?
Do you want to start this one, Divinity?
I can. You know what I'm gonna say is
Yeah.
I don't try explaining it to cynics. I think
Yeah.
that romance is for a very specific group of people that are learning, like I said, like a return to self and community through the basis of the idea of love. I think that the thing that I love about the romance genre is that the message is like baked in. It's like one of those like cupcakes where you like kind of split it open and it has like frosting cylindered like in the middle and you didn't know it was there. You're like, you bite into it and you're like, oh my God, this is so good. I feel like that's what romance has become, kind of almost like a Trojan horse for these deeper, more meaningful messages. And I think that anyone who dismisses it without even giving it a chance misses out on that like delicious frosting kind of like nested in the middle. So I don't really waste my time arguing with people online or even trying to explain to cynics why romance is so valid. I think it's in the experience itself. I think that the numbers and the sales and the trends speak for themselves. Like just the other day, I saw Shonda Rhimes on Thread saying like, "I love book talk. Holler at me if you got a book that you know you want written." Book talk is out here making noise. Romance is out here making noise, and I just think that it can't be dismissed just because someone doesn't like it. The proof is in the pudding, so to speak. I may
Yeah.
be hungry. That's why I'm using all these food analogies.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'd add to that just the so often the argument starts to fall apart once you ask, like, well, have you read any? And they're like, oh, I don't read romance. And it's like, well, then what are you talking about? You Mr. Know Nothing. Shush. You know? And like for me being on the side of it, not only as a reader, where I can truly say as a reader, some of the romance novels that I've read that it's like it changed me. It changed me as a person, whether it's Divinity saying it radicalized me, it healed me, it helped me. To be on the other side of that as an author, to hear people dismiss my genre, it's like, oh, you just write porn or you just write smut or whatever, whatever. And it's like, I have readers come to me, literally last night I had an event and I had readers at the event come to me saying things like, you changed my life, you saved my life, right? You tell me it's nothing. Tell me it's useless. Tell me it's not a worthwhile genre. Tell me we're not writing stories about the human condition that speak to people in moments of similar human condition. If they can say that a piece of fiction that happens to center romance changed or saved their life. Like, okay, but tell me I'm not doing anything with my books. Tell me they're not worth anything. Okay, shush. It's like typically how I see it too. I don't try and argue, and then yeah, I know what I see. I know what I feel as the reader, and I know what I see as an author. Of like, we're moving mountains with some of these books. We're changing norms. We're changing lives, and you see it.
And I think I would add to that too, Emily, like there's not just one way to learn thing. I think that there's like value put in nonfiction books or what you would consider highbrow art books, like maybe science fiction or really epic fantasy, that only those books are valuable and have valuable messages. But I
Yeah,
think like there is a learning that you get to do through romance that is not as disarmed or readily available in those genres because you don't connect to the characters, I think, and this is my personal experience as a reader, as intimately as you do when you're following someone through a romantic story. There's a level of intimacy and relatability that is readily available in romance that you don't really see that kind of breakdown happen in like other genres. So I think that the writers who are putting in the work to write communities and cultures well, we're creating a framework for people to have enough distance while also having enough relatability to do exactly what Emily is doing, is changing lives through the power of story.
I mean, I think there is something to romance that it makes you feel deeply. It opens up a deep relatability with the characters, like you mentioned, but also you feel things within yourself, and I think there's a lot of power in that. Now,
oh, sorry.
No, please.
I mean, when we're living through a time where empathy is under attack, right? We've already been living through and experiencing diversity being under attack. I was essentially shoved out of my department because as a professor of African politics, politics of genocide, politics of development, I was told directly by my department chair, you cannot use the words race and racism. How do you teach politics of genocide without that? But we're not allowed to talk about it's thought suppression, right? And so now it's emotion suppression. You can't think critically about race and racism and how we see them in the world. You can't feel critically about putting yourself into the shoes of a person who may not look like you, or may not have the background that you have, may not have the career that you have, right? You're not allowed to think. You're not allowed to feel, right? And so, God forbid, romance being a largely women-run enterprise, right? Women out here thinking and feeling, call the police, right? Like, we can't have that, right? Shut it down. It's like, okay, we can't have empathy. That's not allowed either. Got it.
I think I think that years from now, historians will look back at this time, look at the books being published, and they'll be able to extract how lots of women and queer identifying people were taking something that was kind of like doubted or just like underestimated, like the underdog of the industry, and how we were packing these messages into our books and kind of giving people a compass to follow, for resistance and self-love and self-care, but also like radicalizing them towards this deep empathy that is so needed. I think that what they're calling smut now, they're going to be saying like all of these headlines coming out about these books with the dragon riders and hockey romances or paranormal romances, that the deeper message was like kind of, again, Trojan horsing this kind of revolution unknown to the people who dismisses romance as this like you said, easy to read fluffy thing. I think that historians will look back at these books and see the messages that we're sending against fascism, racism, genocide, and such, because a lot of the books that I've read in the romantasy and in the just contemporary romance genre, there's always these very deeply underlining messages about standing against those, those things in our world that we should be tearing down and building something new in its place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a common trope too in sci-fi and fantasy. There is always a societal underpinning. These are always allegorical of what's happening around us. So looking and literature at its core is a reflection of our times. Arts at their core are a reflection of the times. So by, developing these dynamics of this mass social reflection, of building in an empathy that we see lacking in the world around us, and building in the justice that lacks in the world around us. Mm-hmm. I think that is something that we'll pick up on historically, or when we look back in history and in these genres of literature. Yeah. Now, kind of in that vein, there has been criticism of romance as inadequately feminist at times, especially around specific tropes like the damsel in distress who needs a hero, or the strong woman who gives up her dreams for a man, and sexual dynamics of control and domination. I know that we in this space disagree with that perception for a lot of reasons, but as professionals in this space, where do you see feminism fitting into romance as a genre, and in what ways do you see romance literature as feminist?
Do you want me to start this one? So when I saw that question, and my first thought was, I kind of maybe I was being too cynical about it, but I feel like it always comes back to the straight white ladies, right? And like, as a white person, I fully own the problems of white people, right? Like, we've been the worst, but it's like, if you step back from the torrent of straight white lady romance, all of these problematic things you're talking about, if you're in non-white romance spaces, if you're in queer romance spaces, all of these issues are like, we're not talking about that here. We're doing entirely different kinds of storytelling. So get out of that river rapid, right? And explore something along the beach. And you will be like, there's so much else out here. So many other forms of feminist representation, or just so many other forms of romance being told that are not, I'm a damsel and he has to come save me. It's very straight white lady, right? is my take on it. And it's a breath of fresh air, I promise you, if you get off that river raft and try something else.
I honestly cannot agree more. I think that those complaints exist within the echo chamber of cishet white, like, feminist romance. And once you do leave that genre and you discover, indie authors and BIPOC authors and queer authors telling stories from that lens and their own lived experiences, you open up this rich world of seeing that, like cultures and like race or religion or whatever the case is, no person, no group is a monolith. And that includes the femme identity. If you identify as a woman, born as a woman, like, if you've had that experience on any level, you understand that it's not monolithic. And I think historically, or even present day, I think that there are people who write to market, and then there are people who write to progress. And I feel like we should support the books that are writing to evolutionize the way that we view feminism, the way that we view the feminine experience, the way that we view femme identities, or just gender as a construct in general, So I think, like, there are books that are written to market because that's what sells. And I think a great way to resist that is to read and champion and talk about the indie authors and the books that are not writing for a traditionally published deal, but are writing because they believe the power of story has the power to change the way that we see and relate to each other in the real world. So I think, like, I could not agree more with what you're saying here about, like, if you're feeling that way about books, I'm like, I always say a clear indication that someone is not reading diversely is if you have the complaint that all books are the same. If you're recycling the same tropes, if you're like, oh, all books are stale and I've DNF'd the last 4 books that I've read, I can guarantee you've probably not picked up a book by an indie or a BIPOC author.
Yeah, totally. I love that. I feel like I want to, like, stitch it on a pillow, right? Like, writing to market versus writing to progress, right? And so it's like that. It is so true, though. There are people doing revolutionary works. There are people doing, just deep, soul-searching, changeable works of fiction that are so important, and no one's reading them, right? Because we're just getting the same, especially in the trad space, we're just getting the same books given to us repackaged. They're hardly even changing the covers, particularly in, like, the romantasy genre. My God, like, I beg for something unique, for something different. But it's just so hard when we're in the capitalist hellscape of, like, we know this sells, we know how to market this, and we know it'll sell, and it really does take active work. I think that's a question that comes later of, like, what can you do? It takes so much active work. It takes active work for me as an author. It takes active work as a reader of, like, correcting your algorithms, training your algorithms to be like, I can't keep seeing this same thing. I know there's more. Don't sit back complacent of, like, I wish there was more. Like Divinity is saying, there is. Be active. Go find it. There is more, right? But it takes work because all these algorithms will drown you, making you think there's just one thing out here and we're going to feed it to you over and over and over till you're sick. you know?
Well, you know what I take hope in is that if Book Talk had the power to save Barnes and Nobles, right? They're remodeling, they're opening up new locations all over the place. If we focus that same kind of energy and supporting authors who are BIPOC, who are indie, who are not published, but have amazing stories that they're out here telling, if
Yeah.
we focus that same energy in that direction, what do you think would happen to the publishing industry? The power is in our hands. We are the market. So we
Yeah.
get to decide the demand that they're supplying for, because that's how capitalism works. It's a supply and demand chain. Whatever is being demanded is what's going to be supplied. So until readers are ready to have a reckoning with our own TBRs, we're going to be stuck in this cyclical discourse about there should be representation, rather making sure that our TBRs represent the representation that we want to see in the world. And the power is in our hands. We're not powerless when it comes to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you hit on something that I want to zoom in on a little bit by zooming out.
Okay.
It seems like there's always been a degree of tension between femininity and feminism. And to compound it in this particular moment, femininity is also under the microscope lately, as specifically feminine aesthetic communities like Beige Life and Cottagecore and lifestyle content like Soft Life and even Book Talk. They've been diverted into alt-right, anti-feminist, and tradwife pipelines. So how do you navigate that tension between feminism, femininity, and gender normativity in your writing and in your reading?
That is such a huge question. do you want to start this one as I try and break down like writing versus reading?
Yeah. Just off the top of my head, I guess I can say in my reading, I try to read women who are messy. I try to read women who are morally gray, the woman who's angry, who's working through her anger in ways that we may not agree with, but we're going to read it and we're going to have a really good time doing it. You know, did she stab him? Yeah, but they made up and they kissed later, so it's fine. So like, I think that in reading, I try to read women who represent the world that I live in, right? And that going back to what I said earlier is that no culture, no community is a monolith. And I think that by saying this whole like putting us into factions is, I feel like, a very useless practice, right? It's like, oh, I'm a beige mom, or I'm an almond mom, or you know, I'm a book girly versus an art girly. And I think like it's fun to have ways to describe your interest, but these feel more like almost like, you know, the factions of Divergent, of just like everyone's kind of sectioning themselves off, where the community is so fractured and it's like not a lot of solidarity. And we see this manifested in, you know, the people who like the cottagecore aesthetic are more likely to go down the pipeline of not championing trans women, right? And knowing that they are a part of our community. And I think if we use these kind of, I guess, like titles to describe what we're interested in and not who we are, then we could see that there's a bigger community here at whole, right? Where it's like we are all kind of interested in story. I think that's just the base of humanity. Like what makes us different from every other species on the planet is that we tell stories. It's in our DNA. Like we love stories. Everything about the human experience is a story, from the day we walk into our first, you know, day of school to, you know, sitting down to read a book. Everything in our life is built around stories. And if we can bring ourselves together, specifically as a femme community, as a queer community here in the book space, and kind of like do away with these walls and let people express themselves the way they want to express themselves, because gender is a construct. The way that we express ourselves, it's, you know, widely indoctrinated. But if we do the work to deconstruct that and see ourselves not as a faction of a faction of a faction of a faction, but as a person with, you know, interests or special interests, if you're neurodivergent like me, then we might find that we have a lot more common ground than not, you know? And I feel like that tension is really, it's not very useful. You know, I don't think that femininity can be defined in one sentence or even by one person. I think that it is subjective. It is about the individual experience of that person and them alone. And I say this as someone who is queer and non-binary, but still identifies as a woman. I even wrote a whole article about this because I will tell people I am a Black woman, but I'm non-binary. And they get kind of confused and they're like, why? And I'm like, because being a Black woman is something that transcends gender. It is a political construct that I will always experience no matter where I go in the world, no matter how I present, I will always be a Black woman, even though I'm non-binary. So that's just like one example of how these titles are not very useful, and they only serve to divide and create more constructs that capitalism can use to profit off of and further divide us so we never come together and attack the real enemy, which is not each other, but capitalism itself.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love it. I think tagging off of that a little bit, putting more of like the political science hat on, right? Like the professor hat when we're talking about these issues of the alt-right, anti-feminist, tradwife pipeline or whatever. I totally agree with Divinity of how subjective it is. Gender is the total construct of it's like you want to live in a tree, live in a tree. You want to churn butter, churn butter. You want to you want to wear beige all the time, wear beige. But protect your rights. Protect your rights. You know what I mean? So it's like protect the thing, the political scientist in me that's like, they want to roll back the 19th Amendment. They're joking about it. They're talking about it. They're preparing for it in the pulpits and on the podcasts. They're coming for it. So I don't care if you want to churn butter, but you vote to protect your right to churn butter if you want to churn butter. You know what I mean? So it's like part of it is like, do whatever you want. Practice your feminism however you want. Wear whatever you want. Inside the nuclear home that is your family, call your husband my lord if that's what you want to do. But they are coming for your bodily autonomy. That's not a fantasy. It's real. Women are bleeding out in parking lots. I almost lost my best friend last year to the miscarriage she was having and the abortion they would not give her. We're bleeding and dying. Like, no one cares about your beige aesthetic when you're bleeding and dying, So the politics here is real of like, we get so wrapped up in like, are you feminine enough? How are you defining feminine? And it's like, she almost died. We're getting like petty, like all of these little things that we let us distract. And it's like, they're coming for the 19th Amendment. They were talking about it in the shadows. Now they're just talking about it. What are we doing that we're focusing on these other things when we should be focusing on this thing? But they love it. They love to see us distracted, focusing on nitpicking whether you should be able to be cottagecore. Of course, you should be able to be cottagecore, right? I should also be able to vote. And so that's what gets me like really stressed as the political scientist. So it's like I've seen this over and over and over again throughout history that they do this. You roll back rights, and we're on that slope. We've been on that slope. We are sliding slipperily down. That's not a word. It's very slippery, and we're sliding down it. You know what I mean? That's what I get stressed about, of like, this all feels like distraction,
Yeah.
I feel like you I'm sorry.
No, please.
I was gonna say, I feel like you articulated that way better than I was like trying to get to that point of like these little factions are all distractions to keep us nitpicking with each other instead of like understanding too. I think I understand this from the lens of someone who has a marginalized identity, is that they always start within those communities before it goes wide. It's almost like a testing group. You notice that they start with the ones that they feel and most likely people don't pay attention to or don't care about. And whatever they do to them, understand that you are not exempt. It's a rollout. It's kind of like when, Apple releases like a new feature or Instagram releases a new feature, they give it to a subset of group and they kind of test it. And once they have it refined, then they roll it out to everyone. And I feel like fascism is not different. Because they're doing it to women now doesn't mean that it's not going to, come to your doorstep. Today, it's a trans woman. Tomorrow, it's you, a white cis het woman, married and living in the suburbs. You're not exempt. And I think that that's what I mean when I said like these factions are useless. Yeah. They really are, because there is no subset of group. If you are a femme identifying person, if you've experienced this, being AFAB, if you have a uterus, like like Emily's saying, your rights are under attack, and like we all need to put these little petty things aside and come together and find that common ground. And I think one thing I really love about romantasy, specifically, I think in the genre of like found family,
Mm.
is it really creates this framework I think a lot of us could learn from, because you have a group of ragtag people from all walks of life, usually coming together, and they're all imperfect people, right? And there's no way it should work that they topple over, their oppressive regimes of governments and stuff, but they do. And they do it not by finding people who are exactly like them, who are perfect and have the same exact ideas about everything. They do it by finding that common ground, finding that one or two things that they can agree on, and pushing progress forward as much as they can. And I feel like it's time for us to make our own little found family, specifically within the bookish and like femme, queer community. And we all like, come together as like a ragtag group of people. We're already doing it in a lot of ways with our romance and kind of defying the odds and being the underdog of like this industry. And look at what we've done so far. And I'm going back to that Barnes and Nobles example. We've already done something like that. Imagine what else we can do if we would just,
I'm
let the small things go.
Divinity, I am the proof. I'm the proof. When I started, the fact that like my Pucking Around is a why choose, it is a super spicy, queer, polyamorous romance.
Yeah.
And I wrote that independently and published it independently because I knew a traditional publisher would never touch it. And in this short amount of time, Book Talk has so exploded out a comfort and a relatability with gay romance, with why choose romance. Why chooses were not on the shelves. You were not getting front placement at Barnes and Noble for polyamorous romance. I was literally just at Barnes and Noble last night with my most recent book in that series. Like that's how quickly this can change.
Congratulations.
You can move mountains but that's
Yeah.
like it's not me, it's the readers. This space was not open to me even 3 years ago. It's been in that short a period of time that Barnes and Noble is like, we are missing out on serious cash because they
Yeah.
will come, right? And so yeah, like I'm proof there's so many authors now that have been able to step into these spaces with these stories that are, not the norm, right? And Barnes and
Right.
Noble's making space for us. It can feel sometimes like traditional publishing and just culture in general is like glacier to change. But the explosion of Book Talk really, I think, is showing they can move fast when they want to, when there's incentive to,
And also that we have the power as artists who are writing and creating story to subvert the very systems that seek to oppress people who have marginalized identities. I know
Mm.
like there's a lot of talk about like, don't buy it from Amazon or don't go to shop at Barnes and Nobles, but I think maybe a more useful conversation or question we can be asking is, what would happen if we only bought BIPOC, queer, and marginalized authors from those websites or from those mediums? How would that change the supply and demand in those spaces? How would
Yeah.
it reshape the way the industry values those stories?
Yeah. It's like, I will
And
only
I
buy
think it
BIPOC
shows,
from
yeah,
Barnes and
exactly. I think it shows that subversion also works in
Noble.
in these spaces.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'll go to, Bryn Weaver's next book is coming out and she's doing an amazing push across indie bookstores, right? Huge indie bookstore
Yeah,
campaign. It's so cool. So it's like, I'll buy my Bryn Weaver through the indie bookstore. I'll buy my
right.
BIPOC through Barnes and Noble and I will make them
Exactly.
carry that title, right?
Yeah.
I think it's genius.
Yeah.
Now, you're talking about movements within these communities. You're talking about these massive changes and shifts. Now, what do you think is the potential for organizing social movements within that space and taking this a step beyond the books that we see in stores, but bringing these communities to the larger movement, to this larger moment, like you were talking about, Emily, of protecting our right to vote, of protecting the very core rights that make us, Americans.
Mm. Yeah, I think coming from the author side of things, I have seen, particularly when I have been very political with some of the things that I have said, authors that have these large readerships, it's almost scary sometimes some of the power that we can have, that we wield. And so, you have authors that use it for good, but then you have authors that use it for literally nothing, right? These authors that have these massive fandoms that will like, we ride at dawn to protect everything about you. They could be doing the bare minimum of like, get out there and vote campaign. Like they could be doing anything. And there's a lot of fear. I know a lot of like I personally know authors that have told me, because they see the way that I'm politically active. I've gotten death threats, right? I in the past couple months have scaled back because things really heated up. I was having people emailing and calling my agent multiple times a day and week, my publishers wanting them to cancel me, wanting to say, you cannot support Emily anymore, you cannot work with her anymore. And then they're threatening to harm me, right? And so it's real that authors are like, I wish I could be as brave as you, right? Like even the last convention I went to, how many big name authors, you'd be surprised, like New York Times bestselling authors coming up to me being like thanking me that I'm saying what they wish they could. And that like, it's like, they have bigger fandoms than I have by like multitudes of 10 and more, you know, like multiples of 10 and more, like they're huge, but they're so scared. But you get it, you know, you get it. But there is power there. Like there's power there. It's about what do you do and how do you do it and how do you get organized? What's the goal, right? As someone who, as a political scientist who used to teach, you know, peace studies, and in particular, I taught things like social movement. I taught courses on collective action. One of the worst things you can do is just like get out there and start doing like, we're going to change the world, right? Like you got to have a plan. You got to have goals that are measurable. You got to have, so that would be one of the issues is like, what are the the authors going to get together in a basement and be like, what's our plan? We're going to register people to vote. Like, but you have to be coordinated and you have to be specific. You have to think about what's our end date? What are we trying to accomplish? There's so much that goes into social movement mobilization. And for most of these authors that are like, I was a kindergarten teacher before this, like, you know, whatever, it's like when you lack that skill set, you can just really feel like it all feels too scary, you know? So I'll just say nothing instead of do anything to help, you know? It's tough. From the political science side, I see it because I see how hard it is to mobilize these things. From the author side, I see it because I've gotten death threats. Like, but then also the social activist in me also feels like, do something, like do more. I've been talking a lot. Divinity, you go.
No, I agree. I think that is a very huge element of it. I think that my advice, if I could give any advice, it would be to start where you are and with what you know, that it doesn't have to be this grand declaration. I think where we are failing a lot is everyone is trying to start their own movement when there have been people who have been doing the grassroots works for years. There are organizations and people who have been already laid the groundwork for these things to happen. And I think that because of the rise in virtue signaling, because everyone is using this kind of like, I'm a good person as social currency, you have so many people trying to start their own thing or have an opinion or the first to post that they're against something, but they're not actually doing anything that affects the real world ramifications of those things. And to that, I say, you don't have to start your own movement or even make a grand declaration. I have so many things that I do that I never post about because it's not about people seeing me do it. It's about having that impact in real life. It's about supporting those organizations, funding those organizations who have already done the work to have those things happen. And in so many ways, the romance space has done so much for a lot of movements that I feel personally passionate about. Like there have been authors who have organized writing books and then using the proceeds to support, relief for the genocide happening in Gaza. There are authors who raise money for LGBTQ, Trevor Project, funds and stuff like that. There are things that we are already doing that's already in motion. And I think that instead of trying to start your own thing, instead of trying to muster up the courage to lead the charge, join the charge. I think that's where the magic is that there's not enough people willing to join because there's so much social currency in being the one being seen as the leader. Everyone wants to be seen as the leader, to kind of virtue signal to their friends, to their followers. this is who I am and this is who I stand for. And I think that it's just more useful to live that
Mhm.
instead of boast about it, you know? And I
Mhm.
think that it takes a deep degree of courage and humility to say that even when I'm in a position where I don't feel safe enough to post because of my family, because my information is readily available, or maybe I didn't even use a pen name. So I just don't have the wiggle room to kind of put myself out there in that way. There are still things that you can do. There are
Yeah.
organizations that you can, support. And there are so many marginalized people and identities that have already created these spaces for us to join them in their fight because they've been fighting a lot longer than we have.
Yeah. I think to that point, Divinity, it's really important just as the author that can come out here and be like, guys, let's chill, right? Of the point that you made about the virtue signaling. And in particular, there's been a lot of fervor about like lists, making lists
Oh,
of like the authors that have like, has this author said something about this thing? If they haven't, we're boycotting, whatever. And so it is that thing of it's like, I do so much activism that I don't front on my page for like you're saying, a myriad of reasons.
right,
Or it's like, or also just authors that's like, I can't know everything about everything. Or like the big one was like trying to nail down authors' parties. Like it's like, did they vote for Kamala or not? That kind of thing. And some of these lists that were going around, they were full of authors that it's like, they're not even US citizens. What are you doing? So that like that virtue signaling of that kind of thing is like everyone take a breath, we don't live the fullness of our lived lives on social media for you. I don't
exactly.
live the fullness of my activism on social media for you. I've put a lot of it off of
Yeah,
social media, exactly like what you said, for my safety, for my family's safety, or very importantly, because I don't want it to be about me. So when I'm doing things and I'm providing scholarships to up and coming authors, or I'm constantly paying table fees for BIPOC
right,
authors and for like new debut authors, like I'll just contact events and be like, I want to pay 5 table fees, like whatever. But it's like, it's things that I'm not talking about and I'm not showing
right.
you, because then it's all about like, look what I did, look at my
Yeah,
activism. But so then it's like, well, then if I don't talk about it, it's like, she's not doing anything. And so you do a little bit. The author in me wants to be like, guys, this is you make this stressful because it feels like I can't tell you because then I'm being performative, but I can't not tell you because then you think I'm doing nothing. What do you want me to do?
yeah. It
It's
becomes
really
like a lose
stressful.
lose situation. It becomes like a lose lose situation
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And I think that by not virtue signaling and by actually doing the work offline and like in real life, I think what happens is you put the responsibility back on the consumer, that
Mhm.
they should be doing the work. I think that we live in a time where people are chronically online, unfortunately, and they use public figures as an avatar, right? And in a way where it's like, if I support this person who is a good person and who has done all of these things, then I am a good person. But they've never done the things that they criticize you for not doing. They just support the people who are doing the thing. That is an avatar. You are not actually an activist. You're just supporting someone who you think is an activist based off of what they've posted. And I think that when you don't virtue signal, when you do the work in real life, just because that is what you do as a human being, you rise to whatever action you can rise to save your fellow man. Like when you do that, you put the responsibility back on the consumer to do the work themselves, to not be able to use you or live through you as an avatar. And of course, we want to support people who have aligned values as us. Like I feel like that is important.
Yeah.
I love to support people who are, supporting BIPOC authors, queer authors, supporting causes that I feel passionate about. I love that. But these lists are not useful in the way that I think that people think that they are. They're not actually moving anything in in real life. They are again one of these like smaller distractions where we take our eye off of the actual like enemy or the cause or the thing that we're actually resisting, and it becomes about us infighting instead of actually having the more broad conversation. And I think that what it also does is it hinders progress, where we move straight past progress and into perfection and into this kind of like uniform way of thinking, and like this dichotomous way of thinking, this black and white thinking, which in and of itself is a pipeline to fascism, because you have to have this or that thinking in order to be in that space. So like we are kind of mirroring now the very thing that we are trying to deconstruct within our own communities and cultures. So I do think that it's really important that everyone takes up action and not just demand action online, because there's so much happening offline
Mhm.
that we can all actively participate in. Where I think that, and this is just my opinion, I feel like when you're doing the work, your hands are so full that you don't have fingers to point at anyone else.
Yeah.
This is such a powerful conversation. We have like a team group chat that everyone is so excited to hear. These are things that in the movement we hear a lot about, that
Mhm.
there's performative infighting. You hear so much about these avatars, about people, online activism getting in the way of actually doing activism.
Mhm.
Virtue signaling online has become its own avatar for activism, not even through the people that we support. And then we also hold people accountable for the things that they're not putting out in public, which
Mhm.
is its own form of unreasonable.
Mhm.
But we do have a question in the chat. Now
Yeah.
we're at that point in the program. Can you share some of those current groups needing support? Are there any groups that the two of you like to support? I know that we at Women's March, we have things for people to do, but I'd love to hear any thoughts that y'all have.
I would start by saying support your local libraries. I feel like local libraries are a safe haven for so many people. I currently live in downtown Los Angeles, where we have a very large homeless population. Specifically during the summertime, it's one of the only places that has like air conditioning and like water that's available for them to just go, restrooms. Like it, our library is like 8 levels. It has like so many resources, and I think that, I feel specifically passionate because, it's right where I live. I walk outside and I see it every day.
Mhm.
The library is always a great place to start because the local library has so many resources, and I can guarantee you, with the rise of fascism, the libraries, they're going to come after them. So if you can support your local library, I am a donor to my library. Like, take my money
Yeah.
because I need you guys to stay open and to stay free. And then also, it houses the most powerful thing that no one can take from you. It's literally a story, and that's all it takes. Because Emily
Mhm.
was just talking about how people walk up to her and say, "You changed my life. You changed my perspective." A library is the most magical place on the planet. Okay, it
Mhm.
has so many stories, both literal history and, fictional learnings. Like, your library, if you don't know where to start with supporting, support the local library.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then I think part of it is kind of to Divinity's point of where it's kind of like the do something, right? The do something. It can feel when you're starting to talk about collective action or you're wanting to talk about like social justice, I'm a change agent, right? And you can start to feel like it gets overwhelming really quick. It gets overwhelming. So instead of trying to like change everything, right? Pick the things you care about, pick things that you care about, and hone in on. It's okay if it's one thing. It's okay if it's one thing that you just are really passionate about. So whether it's it's the forest, the local forest in your backyard, like work with them to do something like forest management. Like right where I live, they do forest management. They have people going through, and they need people for wildfire management to like clean up brush and stuff like that. That's making a difference, and that's saving lives in ways that it's like, get off your phone, go walk in trees for 3 hours and pick up some sticks, right? And just like be one with nature and look at a pine cone. Like if it doesn't have to feel like you're like Lady Victory storming the Bastille. I feel like, to Divinity's point of people feeling like I have to feel like I'm in charge of this, or like I have to be leading the charge of this. Of like
You know,
the smallest things that you can do, the little things, supporting your library, donating books to the little bookstores that are around on your daily walks. Like you can put so much into practice that are little ways that you support your community, and you make it clear and intentional the kind of space you want to live in and the kind of freedom that you want everyone to have and enjoy. Like it does not have to be I'm storming the Bastille. It can
right.
it can feel very quiet almost. It can feel intimate. It can feel just woven into your life, you know? I know that's not a specific thing of like groups, because I feel like it's too personal
Well,
for me to just be like, here's this group and that group and this group. Like,
yeah,
That's
what's
exactly what I was going to
you?
say.
Yeah.
yeah,
Is that it would be so easy to list off like groups that, have been recently talked about or current events that have been happening. But I think that as we were talking about avatars and stuff earlier, this is an invitation for the people watching to do the work. This is an actionable step that you can take to say, what do I feel passionate about? And to Emily's point, there are so many people on the planet that I think that we have to have faith in humanity, that enough of us care about enough things that we're going to cover all those bases. You get what
Yeah.
I'm saying? It's like there are people who are going to care about like the ecological and agricultural part of our world a little bit more deeply than they care about maybe, space stuff. Like, but there will be people who care about that more than they care about, like micro transportation or something like that. Like we all are going to have like these deep interests based on our lived experiences and our identities. And I think that it's an important part of the process of practicing empathy to do that work of saying, what am I passionate about? And therefore, what am I willing to give my time, energy, and even when I can, my finances to back these things? And I think this is a part of the problem, is that everyone wants a list because
Mhm.
it's easier to check off a list than to actually go inward and say, what am I passionate about? And therefore, what am I willing to stand for and to stand against? And you can't figure
Yeah.
that out by checking off a list. You can't,
And I
but
think
also
back
support the
to,
library.
yeah, and I think back to what are my talents, right? Divinity, when you had mentioned that as well, of the skill set that you bring, it's
Right.
central to social movement. The study of social movements is this concept called repertoires of contention, right? So the
Mm.
repertoire of
Hmm.
contention is this idea of what do I know how to do, right? What's within my repertoire of contention? So there's this long list. There's a list, you can Google it. It's like 198 forms of social activism. And it's everything
Hmm.
from like making posters, donating money, leading a march, skywriting, right? And so it's like, that's not in my repertoire of contention. I can't skywrite. I can't fly a plane, but so part of it is
Right.
to Divinity's point of like, look inward. What are you even good at? I can't do the
Yeah.
art. I can't make the posters. I'm hopeless. But I could maybe work on the writing aspect of it. I could pitch it. I could, that's part of it too, is like, what are you even good at? Like,
Yeah.
what do you
I
like? What's it possible for you to do? What's within your repertoire of contention? What are you willing to do? And then what are the groups that need that?
yeah.
I think
I wrote
people grossly underestimate how the power of just showing up.
Yeah.
Because like I'm going to shout out Huntington Beach. Their city council was trying to engage in censorship on the library and control the contents of their local library.
Mhm.
And people showed up and people did the work to make sure that that ballot measure didn't pass. And it
Mhm.
just took people coming together and taking action together. Now we are very close to time. This has been such a robust conversation.
Yeah.
I think I'm contractually obligated to shout out if you are looking for a group to join in with, for some people locally who
Mhm.
are taking action, please join us at action.womensmarch.com. We have a lot coming up in New York. We are going to be making billionaires pay, and that is going to be on September 20th. We are also doing a lot in between, so make sure you're following us here. Make sure that you are following Emily Rath at Emily
Mhm.
Rath Author. You can also find her books and her more about her and where you can find more on her at emilyrathbooks.com. Of course, also follow Divinity Ray. Divinity Ray writes, RAE, Ray. And you can also find them on divinityrayrights.substack.com. We are so thrilled that you have chosen to be part of this conversation with us tonight. It has been such an enriching evening. Make sure that if you signed up and RSVP'd, watch out for your emails because we'll be sending any links that we discussed tonight. And also make sure that you watch the We have an entire page for Reading the Revolution. We're going to be adding a recommended reading library. We're going to be adding our next dates. Next month, we're going to be going back to school with young adult revolutionaries, talking about young adult literature and the revolutionary themes as they relate to this moment in history. We're excited to welcome Romina Garber, author of Cazadora and Lobizona, among many others. So make sure you're following along. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Emily, Divinity, thank you so much for being a
Thank
part
you for
of
having me.
this conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.